Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome back to the most complete spoken English course on YouTube, where you learn English without boring grammar, without textbooks, and without stress. Here, you learn by listening to real-life stories and answering simple questions that will boost your fluency. Today's story is called My Student Called Me a Liar. Let's begin. It was the end of the week, and Mr. James had just finished writing the instructions for the math test on the whiteboard. It was a quiet Friday morning, and the class seemed calm. The test was supposed to be short, just 10 questions about fractions and decimals. Most students opened their notebooks, ready to start. Mr. James handed out the sheets one by one, giving each student a smile of encouragement. Everything seemed to be going fine, until he reached a boy named Logan. Logan was always confident, a little too confident sometimes. He was clever, funny, and often finished his work before everyone else. But he also had a reputation for being dramatic. When Logan got his test paper, he looked at it for about 30 seconds. Then he raised his hand high and said loudly, "Excuse me, Mr. James, this is not what you said we'd have on the test." Mr. James walked over and replied gently, "Logan, this test covers exactly what we practiced, multiplying and dividing fractions and changing decimals." Logan looked directly at him and said, "That's not true. You said we didn't have to study multiplying fractions. You're lying." The room fell silent. Every student stopped what they were doing. Some looked up. Others froze mid-question. Mr. James was speechless for a second. He blinked, unsure if he had heard Logan correctly. He replied, "Logan, I never said that. We reviewed multiplying fractions 3 times this week." Logan crossed his arms. "No, you said we didn't have to study that part. You're changing the rules." There was something sharp and angry in Logan's tone, something challenging and disrespectful. Mr. James felt heat rising in his chest. His face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from frustration. He had always tried to be fair. He worked hard to make his instructions clear. And now, in front of the entire class, one of his own students was calling him a liar. Still, he stayed calm. He said, "Logan, I understand you may feel surprised, but this was in your notes. I even gave an example on the board yesterday." Logan replied, "That's not what I remember." Mr. James didn't know what to say. He didn't want to embarrass the boy, but he couldn't let it go either. The other students were watching closely, waiting to see what would happen. Then something unexpected occurred. One of Logan's classmates, a girl named Sarah, raised her hand. She said, "Mr. James, I remember you showing us how to multiply fractions. We did it on Wednesday. I still have the worksheet." Mr. James nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sarah." A few other students nodded as well. Logan looked around. He realized he was alone in his argument. He lowered his head and said nothing. Mr. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't shame Logan. He simply said, "Let's focus on doing our best. If you have questions later, we can talk one-on-one." The rest of the test went on quietly. Logan didn't say another word during the class. At the end of the day, as students packed up, Logan lingered near the door. When the others had gone, he walked over and said quietly, "I'm sorry, Mr. James. I thought I was right, but I guess I got confused." Mr. James looked at him and smiled gently. "It's okay, Logan. I know you weren't trying to be disrespectful, but next time, let's talk privately before saying something like that in front of everyone." Logan nodded. "Yeah, I understand." That weekend, Mr. James thought a lot about what happened. He knew that teaching wasn't just about math and grammar. It was about helping young people learn how to manage their emotions, how to speak respectfully, and how to admit when they're wrong. And that lesson didn't come from any textbook. Now, it's time for your quiz. Let's test how much you understood from the story. Remember, answer out loud and you have 5 seconds to respond after each question. Ready? Let's go. What was the subject of the test Mr. James gave on Friday? The subject was math, specifically focused on multiplying and dividing fractions, along with converting decimals, topics the class had reviewed during the week. How did Logan respond when he saw his test? Logan immediately said the test was unfair and accused Mr. James of lying, claiming that the teacher had told the class they didn't have to study multiplying fractions. What was Mr. James's initial reaction to Logan's accusation? Mr. James was shocked and taken aback. He paused briefly, but responded calmly, explaining that he had indeed taught those topics multiple times. How did the other students react to the situation? The class went silent and watched closely. Some were confused or uncomfortable, waiting to see how Mr. James would handle being challenged in public. What did Sarah do during the argument? Sarah raised her hand and calmly supported Mr. James by saying she remembered him teaching multiplying fractions and even mentioned the worksheet they used. What effect did Sarah's comment have on Logan? Logan realized that no one else agreed with him, and he lowered his head in silence, understanding that he may have misunderstood the situation. How did Mr. James respond after that moment? He chose not to embarrass Logan. Instead, he suggested they focus on finishing the test and offered to talk privately if Logan had questions later. What did Logan do at the end of the day? Logan stayed behind after class and apologized quietly to Mr. James, admitting that he thought he was right, but had probably gotten confused. How did Mr. James respond to the apology? Mr. James forgave him with kindness, reminded Logan to handle such concerns privately next time, and told him he understood that it wasn't meant to be disrespectful. What lesson did Mr. James reflect on after the incident? He realized that teaching is about much more than academic subjects. It's about guiding young people to communicate respectfully, manage emotions, and grow as human beings. Great job. Even if you didn't get all the answers, remember, the goal is to practice speaking and listening. Now let's go over some vocabulary from today's story. Let's take a closer look at some key words and expressions from the story. Accuse. To say that someone did something wrong or dishonest. For example, she accused her classmate of cheating. Reputation. What people think about someone based on their past actions. For example, he has a reputation for being honest and kind. Frustration. A feeling of anger or disappointment when things don't go as expected. For example, she felt frustration when the computer wouldn't turn on. Shame. To make someone feel bad or embarrassed. For example, he didn't want to shame the student in front of others. Tone. The way someone says something that shows their attitude. For example, his tone was angry, even though his words were polite. Confused. Not understanding something clearly. For example, I was confused by the instructions and needed help. Privately. In a personal, quiet way, not in front of others. For example, she talked to the teacher privately after class. Admit. To say that something you did or said was wrong. For example, he admitted that he forgot to do his homework. Misunderstood. To think something is different from what it actually is. For example, he misunderstood the rules of the game. Textbook. A school book used to teach a subject. For example, the textbook had examples of how to divide fractions. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. You are doing something amazing by learning English with stories. If you enjoyed this lesson, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends so more people can enjoy these stories and learn English the easy way. This is Docentes DigitalesTV, where you learn to speak English fast, easy, and with confidence. See you in the next video.